We're in Revelation. I'm going to finish the last couple of verses I didn't finish, or the last verse actually, chapter 11, verse 19. Then I want to continue on to the next section, Revelation chapter 12. What you have so far is you have 7 seals. Christ broke the seals off the scroll. Then there were 7 judgments of that one. And on the 7th seal, you had 7 trumpets. And the 7th trumpet sounded. There's a worship service that began in heaven, and it had a loud voice that spoke praise of God, the attributes and the glory of God. And then you had the 24 elders falling down, praising and worshiping God, reciting to Him a hymn of His attributes and His sovereignty, His eternal nature, and Him resuming control over the kingdom of this world, taking it back. The kingdom of this world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of His Christ. That's what they're saying. That's the song, Handel's Messiah. It's been restored rightfully to Him because of His judgment of mankind and His rewards to the saints. That's where we are now. Then it says in Revelation chapter 11, verse 19, then God's temple in heaven was opened, and within His temple was seen the ark of His covenant. And there came flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, and an earthquake and a great hailstorm. You have the temple of God. And I'm not sure, like I've said this many times, let me just say it again, and you'll see it tonight if I get this far with it. There are so many things in the book of Revelation which are obviously symbolic, but you don't know if they really are symbolic. I know there's a temple in heaven. I don't know if it's the same kind of temple that Solomon built. I know it's not a physical temple in the sense that it's the temple that Solomon built or the temple where Jesus was at when He threw out the money changers and those kind of people. But there was a physical place in Israel where you would go seek God and worship Him in Jerusalem. It was the temple. And here in heaven, there's the temple of God, and it's open. And it's a spiritual reality. And the spiritual reality is this: men have access to God. That's what the temple represents. It represents the place where you would go and commune with God, see God, worship God, and not just from a distance, but in His presence. So you have this access to God, and because of Jesus Christ's death on the cross, we already have access to God. We have the curtain was torn. When He died, the curtain in the temple that the priests couldn't go into but once a year, that was torn from top to bottom. So anyone could enter that now and have communion, have a relationship with God. The veil that blocked access is torn when Jesus died. So now we can go before God and have access to Him, relationship with Him, fellowship with Him. But here in Revelation 11, you have this temple of God, which John sees. I don't know that it's a physical structure, but it's something you can see. You can see it, you can look at it, and you get to have physical admission to God. You see Him, you see His glory, and there's unmediated fellowship with God. There's nothing to stop you, nothing to have to go, nothing to make it go between you and God. It's just you and God. The temple is open. You have access to it. The temple is open in heaven. And that's forever. And that is the ultimate, I believe, of what heaven will be. Heaven is not just a place where you roam around on clouds and go from planet to planet or whatever your fantasy is about it, which I'm sure that might be part of it. I'm not going to discount that. But this is what ultimately heaven is. The temple of God is there, and it's open, and you can go in and see God, which I believe once you get there and you see God and you're there in the temple, you won't want to go anywhere else. You'll just stay there forever. I kind of truly believe that. It says in Revelation 21, now the dwelling of God is with men, and He will live with them. That's what this is. The temple is open. And then it says the Ark of the Covenant was also seen. You're going all the way back to the ark that God told Moses to make. And the people of Israel had this ark, and it was there. Now that ark was in the temple, and it was the symbol of the presence of God, and it was so secretive that only the high priest could go in and see the ark even once a year. Like, it was there, but even the priest didn't have access to it. One priest had access to it once a year. Here's this ark. But in this scene, it's in plain view. It says, within the temple was seen the ark of his covenant. It's in plain view for everyone who's there to see it, reminding us that God made a covenant with Israel, and that covenant promise of his kingdom is going to stand forever. That's what that symbolizes. I believe that's what it's talking about. So that's where we are from chapter 11. That's what I didn't finish last week. But this is where things start to get weird for me a little bit, I think. Not weird, but just, I'd put it in my notes this way. Things seem to squeeze up in the chronology of things. Chapter 6 through 11 have been describing judgments of God, sealed judgments and trumpet judgments. Those 5 chapters talk about those trumpets, those seals, those judgments are coming, or those judgments have happened. And this is the tribulation period. By the time you get to the end of chapter 11, we're at the end of the tribulation. The 2 witnesses prophesy for 1,260 days, the last 3.5 years of the tribulation. We're already at the end of the tribulation period by the end of chapter 11. So it's over in terms of chronology goes, or it's nearly over. But then you have the 7th trumpet. And the 7th trumpet sounds, and you have the worship scene in heaven. But the effects of the 7th trumpet don't really kick in or take place until chapter 15, which if we're in chapter 12, we got 12, 13, 14 before we actually get to what the 7th trumpet does in terms of judgment goes. So you have 13, 14, 15. What does that mean? 12, 13, and 14, that's what I mean. They appear to be something different. And some people have interpreted this as a recap. They go back and recap all of the events of chapter 6 through 11. Sort of, I guess. Have you ever heard that before? Recapitulation? That's what they're saying this is, a recapitulation of the events that's already happened. And it uses really heavy symbolic language, very heavy, very deep spiritual drama with things that are hard to understand, truly are. Not all of it, but some of it really is. And then you have chapter 15 that comes and resumes the chronological events of judgment that are happening on the earth. So let's try it. Let's see what happens. I'm going to give my own disclaimer. I'm going to qualify myself. There's a lot of stuff here. I really don't know if I know what I'm talking about. I think I'm right, but we'll see. We'll find out when we get to heaven. Y'all find out that I was right. It says in chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, a great and wondrous sign appeared in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. You have signs in heaven. Now, up to this point, in fact, in the whole book of Revelation, 7 signs are mentioned, signs from this point on. No signs are mentioned before this. Now, here's a sign, something new, a sign that points to something. A sign is shows something significant, a reality of something that right now is just a sign pointing to that. And this is what this is. A woman, let me go back and figure what I want to say. A sign is something that points to something, to a reality of something else. This is what happened with Jesus. In John chapter 2, verse 23, it says, "Now Jesus was in Jerusalem at the Passover feast. Many people saw the miraculous signs he was doing and believed in his name." So Jesus is doing these signs, turning water into wine, healing people, all kinds of things, casting out demons. And people are seeing that and they go, this man must be the Messiah that we've been waiting on. He can do things that these signs point to. No one can do this if they're not the Messiah. He is the Messiah. The signs point to him. They pointed to the reality that that's who he is and that he came from God. Nicodemus in John chapter 3, verse 2 says, he came to Jesus at night and said, Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher who has come from God, for no one could perform the miraculous signs you were doing if God were not with him. So signs are something that God does to point to another reality. The signs themselves are not the reality. What they point to is the reality. Jesus doing signs was cool and everything, but it would have been wasted if you watch these signs and then not look at the man who did the signs and believe who he is. You are a man sent from God, for no one could do the things that you do if God didn't send him, if God were not with him. You are who we're here to look at, not the sign. So here's this great sign that appears in heaven, John says, and it's that drum. There we go. That's a sign. What's that? Yeah, we have to fix that. But here's this great sign, and all the language, all of it. I'm trying to think if there's any part of this language that's not symbolic. All of this is symbolic, and I don't think it's having to guess which is symbolic and which is literal. This is obvious. All this language here that we're going to read and look at tonight is symbolic. It's a woman clothed with the sun. Anyone ever seen a literal woman clothed with the literal sun? She does. It's not literal, it's figurative, it's symbolic. She's described with the sun, the moon, and the crown of stars, and she's glorious and radiant. And I'll try to get into who she is or what her identity is sometime in this lesson tonight. But one of the clues about what her symbolism represents, she's a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet and a crown of 12 stars on her head. And she's glorious, she's radiant, she's splendorous. She's amazing to look at. But she's also pregnant. And she's in labor. She's in the middle of labor, in pain already, that she's pregnant. And that's one of the clues about who she is. She's a pregnant woman in labor. Another clue about who she is that she has 12 stars in her crown. This is cool. This word for crown is the Greek word Stephanos. Get Stephen from it. That's what the word means, crown. What it means. But that's the word used to describe her. And so I think as we go along, we'll maybe figure out a little bit more about her identity as we go. But John immediately switches from her as a great sign to another sign. So I already got one sign that's got two features in it. She's pregnant and in labor, and she has a crown with 12 stars in it. And she's just radiant and glorious. But here's the other sign, verse 3 and 4. Then another sign appeared in heaven. Another sign that points to something else. An enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on his head. On his heads. His tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. All right, what does this mean? An enormous, a great, the word is great, a great, a large, a large, great red dragon. Now, when you think of dragon, you think of our modern view of a dragon. He's got wings and he breathes fire and he flies around. That's a dragon. Modern day time, ancient times, they didn't think of a dragon that way. They thought of it more like a serpent, which it really was, like a serpent. But here's this word dragon. It's the Greek word drakon. I guess you get the English word dragon from it. It's used 13 times in the New Testament. All of them are in Revelation. This word dragon is used 13 times, all of them in the book of Revelation. He's a large red monster. And we learn in verse 9, I'll skip verse 9 for tonight, to learn who he is. It says in chapter 12, verse 9, the great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. In chapter 20, verse 2, it says, he seized the dragon, that ancient serpent, who is the devil or Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. So we know who this large red dragon is. It tells us in the text. It's Satan. This dragon is the devil. This dragon is Satan. And he has 7 heads, each with a crown. This is a different word for crown. This is the word diadema. I think some English translations actually say diadem, which is not an English word. It is now, but it wasn't until we just transliterated a Greek word, diadema, and it means a royal headband, like a headband that you wear around your head, like a crown, but just a headband. That's what it means. And by him having 7 heads, each with a crown on it, this red dragon, this devil, Satan, is claiming for himself authority to rule. That's what those crowns are. He's the king. He's ruling. He's in charge. That's what he's doing. He has 7 heads with 7 crowns. Now, I'm not going to get into what all the 7 heads mean and the 10 horns, because I'm not sure what they all mean at this point, or at least I really don't know. But he shows himself with more symbolism. Stars out of the sky. With his tail, he hurls 1/3 of the stars out of the sky. In the Bible, stars are commonly referred to or interpreted as angels, which is where I'm going to go with it. I think this is symbolic for, with his tail, he flung out of heaven 1/3 of the angels. He takes 1/3 of the angels with him in his rebellion against God and him usurping the authority of God. He takes 1/3 of the angels that God created with him. Now, I don't know how many angels there are that joined Satan. I don't know how many angels fell when he did, but sometime, I believe not long after the creation of the earth, after the 7th day when God rested, after the 6th day when God said he saw everything that he made and it was very good. There was nothing wrong with the earth. There were no fallen angels in the earth. Nothing bad was happening on the earth. It was beautiful and it was great. No demon activity at all. The angels hadn't fallen yet. Satan hadn't fallen yet. So maybe on the 8th day, I don't know. I don't know how many angels there were that fell with him, but the text in Revelation uses the phrase myriads and myriads. And myriad was just a Greek word that meant a number that you can't count to. Like the largest number you can think of, you would say a bazillion, gillion, a gazillion. That's what we would say. Just a myriad of angels. Myriads and myriads of angels. And this is 1/3 of them. Now, we've already seen in Revelation chapter 9, you have a large swarm of locust demons coming out of the abyss. A swarm. How many is that? Well, you think of a swarm of locusts, there are probably millions and millions of locusts in a swarm. I'm just going to say that many demons that coming out of the abyss. Then also in chapter 9, you have another demon horde coming at you, 200 million of them. So we're looking at least 200 million plus another 100 billion demons. He flung them to the earth. Well, I don't know when this is happening. I don't think this is happening in the tribulation. This has already happened in the earth. This is something that's already taken place in the earth. Jesus said, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven in Luke 10. But there are a lot of demons on the earth. Millions and millions of demons on the earth. Roaming around, deceiving people, causing problems, causing heartaches of all kinds, causing violence, messing up families, all kinds of things these demons are doing, causing great, great harm in the earth. That's who the dragon is. The dragon is the king of the demons. The dragon is the one who brought all these demons with him when he fell to the earth. He is not very friendly. He is not very friendly to the woman, and he's not very friendly to the woman, and especially her child. It says in verse 4, the dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth so that he might devour her child the moment it was born. The symbolism is like, got you on the edge of your seat. It's captivating. You can't wait to see what the story's going to be. This woman is pregnant. She's in the middle of labor. She's in pain. She's in labor pain, waiting for the baby to come. And here's this dragon stalking her, waiting, watching for the baby to be born so he can devour it, the text says. Anticipation, so he can destroy this baby. And I would say, symbolically, this is obvious that this means, the symbol is obvious at this point. Satan and his demonic followers have been trying to thwart the purpose of God for mankind ever since the garden. When God told them, when Adam and Eve fell, Satan tempted the woman. She ate the fruit, gave some to her husband who was with her, and then God came and cursed them. And he cursed the serpent too, and he said, her seed shall bruise your head. You'll bruise his heel. He'll crush your head. It says it right there, verse 15. I'll put enmity between you and the woman and between your offspring and hers, and he will crush your head and you will strike his heel. So at every opportunity since then, because that was the curse God put on him, what's he supposed to do? Just sit back and go, yeah, okay, I'm just waiting for that day to happen. Now he's thinking of ways that he can mess that up, that curse that God put on him might not happen. How can I thwart that curse? How can I mess it up so God's curse won't happen to me? That's in essence what he's been doing since the creation of the world. John writes in 1 John 3:12, do not be like Cain, who belonged to the evil one, Satan, and murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his own actions were evil and his brothers were righteous. All right, so here's your first clue. Adam and Eve have two sons. Cain, who does not do what God wants him to do, does not bring a blood sacrifice. Abel does do what God wants him to do and does the righteous thing, bringing a sacrifice of blood to have his sins atoned for. Cain doesn't do it. So God says, do what's right, Cain, and Cain doesn't want to do what's right, so he kills his brother. That's prompted, he says, because he belonged to the evil one, John says. And the evil one thought, well, I got two sons. If I kill the good one and the bad one's going to rule in the earth, well, then that promise can't come true. That's what he's thinking. That's what I think he's thinking. Satan prompted Cain to kill Abel. Therefore, Abel's out of the picture and no good can come. This curse won't happen to me. Then you have more sons. They had Seth and they had a bunch of sons, and the population grew wild. It says in chapter 6, when men began to increase in number on earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God, these are the fallen angels. I'm telling you, that's what this means. They saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit will not contend with man forever, for he is mortal. His days will be like 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days. So you have these demons come and procreate with earth women. And what kind of babies do they have? What kind of people populate the earth? And we're talking millions. I'm not talking like a few people. We're talking like the sons of God. He took a third of the angels with him. You have a lot of angels, a lot of fallen angels, a lot of demons who see these women are beautiful, and they take any of them they want to and have children with them. And I believe these are the Nephilim. They have these children that are demon babies. They're powerful, and they're strong, and they're mean, and they're distorted. Everything about them is the whole earth, everything is messed up. Mankind is really messed up because the demons have made these Nephilim. And so when the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them, they were the heroes of old, men of renown. And by heroes of old, men of renown, I think the Moses means in Genesis, that these were not people that you messed with. You'd see a Nephilim, he was probably a big man. If you looked at him wrong, he might just backhand you and take your head off. Or say, what are you looking at? And kill you. You do not want to fight with one of them. That's what was going on in the earth. Who's responsible for that? Satan. His demons. He's a third of the demons. This ain't all of them, but this is a lot of them. So you have population on the earth, mankind. A huge portion of the population is so tainted with sin and evil and wickedness and Nephilim stuff that how are you going to get this promise to Eve and this curse to the serpent going to happen? All right, well, he says, her seed will crush your head. I put enmity between you and her seed. He'll crush your head. Well, if I've done messed up the human race, he's not going to come. So God destroys the earth and saves only 8 people out of it. Then later you have Satan influencing Pharaoh to kill the Hebrew baby boys that are 2 years old and younger. I don't like all these Hebrews taking over my country, so kill all the baby boys. If I kill the baby boys, I'll stop the bloodline and there'll be no more Hebrews in a couple of generations. Nobody will be left. And if we can do that, well then the offspring of this woman, Eve, won't be able to crush my head. And then Herod tried to kill the baby boys 2 years old and younger when Jesus was born in order to eliminate, in his mind, it's already too late now. Where's the one who's born the King of the Jews? And everybody panics, and he makes orders to kill all the babies 2 years old and younger. Well, if I kill all the baby boys 2 years old and under around Jerusalem, I'll be sure to get this King of the Jews, and it'll be done. And once the King of the Jews is dead, he won't be able to crush my head. This is all the work of Satan. Satan's work is to destroy the purpose of God in bringing the one who's going to crush his head. That's what this is. Satan wants to kill the woman's child. That's the symbolism here. The woman's pregnant. She's going to have a baby. She's in labor, and he's waiting with anticipation to kill her baby. But too bad for him, it doesn't happen that way. It says in verse 5, she gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. She has a son. She has a baby, a son. And we're told who he is. We're not told who he is in this text, except what he does. He is the one who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. And I can tell you who I know who that is, because that's prophesied in Psalm chapter 2. It's a messianic prophecy to prophesy who the Messiah is. He says, ask of me, Psalm 2, 8, 9, and I will make the nations your inheritance, the ends of the earth your possession. You will rule them with an iron scepter. You will dash them to pieces like pottery. So the woman, clothed with the sun and the moon on her feet and the crown with 12 stars on her head, gives birth to the Messiah. That's who her baby is. Her baby is the Messiah. Her baby is Christ. That's the clue to her identity. We'll get to that later. We won't get to it tonight. I'm already out of time. But this baby, it says, is the one who will rule the nations, all the nations, with an iron scepter. Well, you can't kill this baby dragon, even though you're waiting for him to be born so you can take him right there and kill him. Too bad for you. That's not going to happen. This is going to be the baby who's going to rule all the nations with an iron scepter. He will reign. This baby, this son, this Messiah will reign in every geopolitical boundary, every ethnic boundary, every racial boundary, every familial group, every family group boundary. But in particularly, he means, I believe, the political nations, where you have governments and kings and rulers who, by the way, all those rulers defy Christ. All those rulers claim to be authority of their own, they rage at Jesus. They rage at his people. They hate his people. And yet he's going to rule them with an iron rod. Which means, okay, he's got an iron rod in his hand. Iron means you can't break it. But it also means he's determined to bring swift justice to all the nations. Now, this is going to be the coolest president you've ever seen. You don't like mean tweets? Wait till you see the guy with an iron rod in his hand. And if you get out of line, he's just going to take that iron rod and whack you with it. And I mean that. That's what it means. He rules with an iron rod. He brings swift justice into play. He squashes all rebellion. Anybody who sits their heads up and says, what are you looking at? He's just going to go, this, and knock you out with it. That's what it means. He doesn't just stand there with an iron scepter. He has an iron scepter to beat you with if you get out of line. That's what he means. He's going to rule. And I believe it refers to a literal kingdom rule. He's going to rule over all of the nations, every nation, every country, every one of them. None will be excluded. They'll all be there. All their governments, all their senators, all their congressmen, all their presidents, all their prime ministers, all their whatever they got. All their governors, he's going to rule them. And the language, I believe, is way too superlative to just be talking about he rules and reigns in the hearts of men. He does rule and reign in the hearts of men. That's his kingdom now. It's a spiritual kingdom. But he's talking here, he's going to rule all the nations with a scepter. It's a spiritual kingdom, but he's literally going to rule in it. That's what I believe he means. He is the Messiah who is promised to defeat Satan, crush your head, and Satan who usurped dominion on the earth and ruled in the earth and made his will known in the earth, how he wanted it to be, all under the sovereign hand of God, but that's what he did. So the Messiah is the one who's promised to defeat him and rule him and reign in the nations and hit them with an iron scepter. And there was nothing Satan can do to stop him. Couldn't stop him. Couldn't stop him. His attempt to defeat Christ failed every turn, everywhere, every place, all the way back from Cain killing Abel. That was an attempt to defeat Christ. When the Nephilim, when the demons came and cohabitated with earth women and made the Nephilim, that was an attempt by Satan to defeat Christ. When Pharaoh tried to kill all the baby boys in Egypt, all the Hebrew babies, that was an attempt by Satan to defeat Christ. When Satan tried to kill all the babies in Jerusalem when Jesus was born, in Bethlehem when Jesus was born, that was an attempt for him to defeat Christ, and he can't do it. He's failed. And he fails this time too. It says in verse 5, and I'm out of time, I'm going to read it and then we'll stop. It's fitting too for me to stop because I have things I don't understand. I want to be able to explain, and I'll do a better job explaining them when I have more time. It says in verse 5, and her child was snatched up to God and to his throne. Almost like he's getting ready to grab this baby that's born and grab it right out and kill it. But God snatched it up. Snatched the child up to God and to his throne. And obviously we know what that means. Jesus was crucified for the sins of his people. He was resurrected from the dead. And he ascended on a cloud at the right hand of the Father's throne. He's at the Father's throne and in heaven right now. He died on the cross, rose from the dead, ascended on a cloud, sits down at the right hand of the Father of God, where he intercedes and intervenes for his people until he returns again to establish his kingdom, where he does rule with an iron scepter over all the nations. That's what I believe eschatologically, right here in this text. Revelation chapter 12. He is Lord, and there is no opportunity at all for Satan to get to him. There is no opportunity for Satan to prevent Christ's ultimate rule on the earth. That's what I believe all this means. Now, I do have a hard question. I don't know if I have a good answer for, but I put it in my notes. Who is this woman? Who's the woman? The sun and the moon and the crown of stars, who's pregnant and has the baby. the dragon hates her, but he really hates her kid. We'll have to talk about that next time. I'll probably do a better job of teaching it next time than I would have done tonight anyway. But I want to look at it more clearly, I think. Who is this woman? That's all we have time for tonight. So let's pray, and then we'll hang out a few minutes and go home. Father God, we love you. We thank you that you've been gracious to us to give us this book, Revelation, to preserve it for us up to this evening, to give me this grace, this opportunity, responsibility, and privilege, and joy. Even though you know, Lord, you know my heart, I've struggled trying to understand symbolic language, which I don't know if I do good, but Lord, I thank you that you gave it to us, that we could learn it and hear it tonight. Lord, I do pray you'll give us understanding as we study it some more, that we will enjoy seeing how you play out your will, your purpose for the earth in judging mankind and rewarding your saints, bringing this whole drama to a conclusion, with Jesus being glorified and ruling all the nations with an iron scepter. Lord, I long to see that. I long to be there and watch him rule with no election anxiety disorder ever. Lord, I pray you'll give us a good night. Keep us safe this week. Bring us back together Sunday. We can worship and fellowship, have a good fellowship luncheon, study some more in 2 Corinthians, and just glorify Jesus. Let that be what happens, Father. I pray you'll do that for us in his name, for his sake, for his glory. Amen.